Sarah Martinez sat in the back corner of the music room, her fingers moving slowly across the old piano keys. The sound was soft and careful. She did not want anyone to notice her. Other students in her music class played loud and fast songs. They smiled big smiles when people clapped for them. Sarah was different. She liked to stay quiet. Mrs. Chun, her music teacher, walked around the room listening to each student. When she came to Sarah, she always nodded and said, "Good job," in a kind voice. But Sarah could tell that Mrs. Chen thought she was just okay at piano. Not special, not talented like the other kids. "Play it one more time, Sarah," Mrs. Chun said. "Remember to keep your fingers curved like little bridges." Sarah nodded and played the simple song again. It was a basic tune that most kids learned in their first year. She had been playing songs like this for 2 years now. While other students moved on to harder music, Sarah stayed with the easy pieces. Mrs. Chun said it was better for her to master the basics first, after class. Sarah packed her music books into her old backpack. The books were thin and simple. She watched as her classmate Emma put away thick books full of complicated music. Emma was the star of their music class. She played pieces that made everyone stop and listen. Sarah wished she could play like Emma, but she never said this out loud. The school day ended at 3 o'clock. Most kids went home or to after-school activities. Sarah had a different routine. She walked 6 blocks to her family's small restaurant, called Martinez Family Kitchen. The building was old and the paint was starting to peel, but it was clean and warm inside. Her mother, Rosa, was already busy preparing food for the dinner rush. Her father, Miguel, was fixing a wobbly table near the window. They both looked up and smiled when Sarah walked in. "How was school today, Mia?" her mother asked, using the Spanish word that meant "my daughter." "It was fine," Sarah answered. She always said this, even when she had a good day or a bad day. Her parents were too busy to hear long stories about school. Sarah went to the small room behind the kitchen and changed into her work clothes. Black pants and a white shirt with the restaurant's name on it. She tied her long dark hair back and washed her hands. By 4 o'clock she was ready to work. The restaurant was not fancy, but the food was delicious. People from the neighborhood came there often. Sarah knew many of the customers by name. She served them food, filled their water glasses, and cleaned their tables when they left. Her hands moved quickly as she worked. After 2 years of helping at the restaurant, she knew exactly what to do. "Table 4 needs more salsa," her father called from behind the counter. "I'll get it," Sarah said. She grabbed a small bowl of fresh salsa and walked over to the table. The customers smiled and thanked her. Sarah smiled back, but her mind was somewhere else. The dinner rush lasted from 5 o'clock until 8 o'clock. During this time, the restaurant was full of people talking and laughing. Sarah moved between the tables like a dancer, never bumping into anyone or dropping anything. Her parents were proud of how well she worked, but Sarah had a secret. Every night after the restaurant closed, after her parents went home, after the dishes were washed and the floor was swept, she stayed behind. In the back corner of the dining room sat an old upright piano. It had been her grandfather's piano. He had died 3 years ago, but the piano stayed in the restaurant. Most people forgot the piano was there. It was covered with a cloth and had some plants sitting on top of it, but Sarah never forgot about it. When everyone was gone and the restaurant was quiet, she would move the plants and pull off the cloth. Then she would sit on the old wooden bench and play. This was when Sarah became a different person. Her careful, quiet movements changed. Her fingers flew across the keys like birds. She played songs that were nothing like the simple tunes from music class. She played complicated pieces that would make Mrs. Chin's eyes grow wide with surprise. Sarah had taught herself these songs by watching videos on her phone. When the restaurant had customers, she would use the free internet to find classical music videos. She would watch the pianist's hands and try to remember how they moved. At home, she would draw the piano keys on paper and practice the finger movements. Her grandfather had left behind some old sheet music. Most of it was yellow and hard to read, but Sarah studied it carefully. She learned to read the complicated symbols and notes. Slowly, piece by piece, she taught herself to play music that was far beyond what anyone expected from her. The old piano was not perfect. Some keys stuck and others sounded a little off. But to Sarah, it was the most beautiful instrument in the world. When she played it late at night, she felt like she was talking to her grandfather. She remembered how he used to play songs for the family during holidays. He had big hands that could reach across many keys at once, and he played with so much. Feeling that sometimes people would cry. Sarah's parents knew she stayed late sometimes, but they thought she was just doing homework or cleaning. They never heard her play because they lived in an apartment above a shop 2 blocks away. The restaurant's walls were thick, and Sarah played softly so she would not disturb the neighbors. Every night was the same routine: work until closing time, clean everything, wait until the street was quiet, then play piano until her fingers were too tired to continue. She would practice the same difficult pieces over and over until they sounded right. Some nights she would play until 2 in the morning. Sarah never told anyone about her secret playing. Not her parents, not her friends, not Mrs. Chun. She was afraid they would not believe her. Or worse, they might listen and decide she was not as good as she thought she was. It was safer to keep the secret. At school, she continued to play simple songs in music class. She let Mrs. Chun think she was just an average student who needed easy music. It was easier than explaining the truth. Sarah had learned that sometimes it was better to be underestimated than to try and fail in front of everyone. But late at night, in the empty restaurant with only the old piano for company, Sarah was not average at all. She was extraordinary. Her music filled the quiet space with beauty and emotion. If anyone had walked by and heard her play, they would have stopped in amazement, but no one ever did. The street was always empty, and Sarah's secret remained safe. This was Sarah's life. Simple and quiet on the outside, but full of hidden music on the inside. She did not know that everything was about to change. She did not know that her carefully hidden talent would soon be discovered. She only knew that she loved to play piano, and that was enough for now. Mrs. Chun stood in front of her desk with a worried look on her face. It was Monday morning, and she had just received some bad news. The regional music competition was only 3 weeks away, and she had a problem. 3 of her best students could not compete anymore. Emma, the star piano player, had gotten sick with a bad case of flu that turned into pneumonia. The doctor said she needed to rest for at least a month. Then there was David, who played violin beautifully. His family had to move to another state because of his father's new job. And finally, Maria, who was supposed to play flute, broke her arm in a bicycle accident over the weekend. Mrs. Chun looked at her list of students who were signed up for the competition. She needed one more person to fill the last spot, or her school would not be able to participate at all. The competition was important. Schools from all over the region would be there. It was a chance for students to show their talents and maybe win scholarships for college. She thought about each of her remaining students. Most of them were too nervous to perform in front of a big audience. Others were not ready for such an important competition. Then she thought about Sarah Martinez. Sarah was always reliable. She came to class on time, practiced her assignments, and never caused any trouble. She was not the most talented student Mrs. Chun had ever taught, but she was steady and dependable. Maybe she would be willing to help. Mrs. Chun made up her mind. After the morning music class, she asked Sarah to stay behind. "Sarah, I need to ask you something," Mrs. Chun said when the other students had left. "I'm in a difficult situation. With the regional competition." Sarah felt her heart beat faster. She had heard about the competition, of course. It was a big event that happened every year. Only the best music students got to participate. She had never imagined that Mrs. Chun would talk to her about it. 3 of my students can't compete anymore," Mrs. Chun continued. "I need one more person to fill the last spot. Would you be interested?" Sarah's mouth opened, but no words came out. She was shocked. Mrs. Chun wanted her to compete. Her Sarah Martinez, who only played simple songs in class. "I know it's short notice," Mrs. Chun said, "and I know you usually prefer easier pieces, but I have the perfect song for you." "It's a Bach minuet?" Very classic and beautiful, but not too complicated. I think you could handle it well. Sarah finally found her voice. You really want me to compete? Yes, Mrs. Chun said with a smile. You're a good student, Sarah. You work hard and you're always prepared. Those qualities matter more than you might think. Sarah felt a mix of excitement and fear. Part of her wanted to say yes right away, but another part of her was scared. What if she embarrassed herself? What if people laughed? What if she was not good enough? Can I think about it? Sarah asked. Of course, Mrs. Chun said. But I need to know by Wednesday. The paperwork has to be submitted by Thursday. Sarah walked home in a daze. Her mind was spinning with thoughts and questions. When she got to the restaurant, her parents could see that something was different. What happened at school today? Her mother asked. You look like you saw a ghost. Sarah told her parents about Mrs. Chun's offer. She explained about the competition and the batch minuet. Her parents listened carefully. That sounds like a wonderful opportunity, her father said. Your teacher must think you're good at piano. But what if I mess up? Sarah asked. What if? I'm not good enough. You won't know unless you try, her mother said. And we'll be proud of you no matter what happens. That night, Sarah went to work as usual. She served customers and cleaned tables, but her mind was not on her tasks. She kept thinking about the competition. She imagined herself sitting at a big piano on a stage with hundreds of people watching her after the restaurant closed. Sarah sat at her grandfather's old piano. Instead of playing her usual complicated pieces, she found some simple batch music online. She printed it out at the library computer and brought it back to practice. The batch minuet was much easier than the songs she usually played at night. Her fingers could play it perfectly after just a few tries. But somehow, it felt wrong to play such simple music when she could do so much more. Sarah thought about her grandfather. He had always told her that music was about more than just playing the right notes. It was about telling a story and making people feel something. Could she tell a good story with such a simple song? The next day at school, Sarah's friend Jessica found her at lunch. I heard Mrs. Chun asked you to be in the music competition. Jessica said, That's so cool. Word had already spread around the school. Some students were excited for Sarah. Others seemed surprised that Mrs. Chun had chosen her instead of someone else. Are you going to do it? Jessica asked. I don't know yet, Sarah said. I'm scared I'll mess up. Come on, Jessica said. How hard can it be? It's just a simple song, right? Sarah nodded, but inside she felt strange. Everyone assumed she would play something basic and easy. No one expected anything special from her. Maybe that was good? There would be less pressure if people's expectations were low. That afternoon, Mrs. Chun showed Sarah the sheet music for the batch minuet. It was printed on clean white paper, much nicer than the old yellow music Sarah practiced with at night. This is a beautiful piece, Mrs. Chun said. Batch wrote it over 250 years ago, but it still sounds fresh and lovely today. Take your time learning it. Remember, the competition is about doing your best, not about being perfect. Sarah took the music home and studied it carefully. The notes were familiar and comfortable. She could play this song with her eyes closed. But as she sat at the old piano that night, an idea began to form in her mind. What if she played more than just the batch minuet? What if she showed people what she could really do? It was a dangerous thought. If she played her secret music and messed up, everyone would know she had been hiding her abilities. But if she succeeded... Sarah shook her head. It was too risky. Mrs. Chun expected her to play the simple batch piece, and that was what she should do. Anything else would be showing off, and Sarah was not the type of person who showed off, but the idea would not go away. Every time she played the batch minuet, she heard other melodies in her head. Her fingers wanted to keep playing after the simple song ended. Her grandfather's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, Music is about telling your story, Mia. What story do you want to tell? On Wednesday morning, Sarah made her decision. She found Mrs. Chun before the first class started. I'll do it, Sarah. Sighed, I'll compete in the regional competition. Mrs. Chin's face lit up with a big smile. That's wonderful, Sarah. I'm so proud of you for being brave enough to try. As Sarah walked to her first class, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had said yes to the competition, but she still had not decided exactly what she would play. The safe choice was the Bach Minuet, just like Mrs. Chun expected. But deep in her heart, Sarah was starting to think about taking a much bigger risk. She had 3 weeks to decide, 3 weeks to prepare, 3 weeks to either play it safe or show the world who she really was. Sarah Martinez, the quiet girl who served food and played simple songs, was about to face the biggest decision of her life. The competition would change everything, but Sarah did not know that yet. She only knew that for the first time in her life, someone believed she was good enough to represent her school. That feeling was both thrilling and terrifying. Sarah stared at the Bach Minuet sheet music on her grandfather's piano. It was Thursday night, one day after she had agreed to compete. The restaurant was quiet and empty, just like every night when she practiced. But tonight felt different. Tonight she had to make an important choice. She played the Bach piece from beginning to end. Her fingers moved easily across the keys. The melody was pretty and gentle. It would be a safe choice for the competition. Mrs. Chun would be happy. And Sarah probably would not embarrass herself, but as the last note faded away, Sarah felt empty inside. The song was beautiful, but it did not tell her story. It did not show who she really was or what she could really do. Sarah thought about her grandfather again. She remembered something he had told her when she was little. They were sitting at this same piano, and he was teaching her a simple song. Music is like cooking, Mia, he had said. You can follow the recipe exactly and make something good. But if you want to make something special, something that people will never forget, you have to add your own ingredients. You have to put your heart into it. Sarah looked at the Bach sheet music again. Then she looked at the stack of complicated music she had been practicing in secret. An idea was growing in her mind, getting stronger every day. What if she started with the Bach Minuet, just like Mrs. Chun expected? But then, what if she did not stop there? What if she let the simple melody flow into something more complex? Something that showed her real abilities? It was a crazy idea. If she messed up, everyone would know she had been lying about her skill level. Mrs. Chun might be angry that Sarah had not been honest. Her classmates might think she was a show-off, but if she pulled it off, Sarah made her decision. She would create her own version of the Bach Minuet. She would start simple, but then she would add her own ingredients. To make it special, the next 3 weeks became the most intense of Sarah's life. During the day, she went to school and acted normal. She still sat quietly in music class and played simple songs when Mrs. Chun asked her to practice. She still worked at the restaurant every afternoon and evening, serving customers and cleaning tables, but every night after closing time, Sarah became a different person. She worked on her secret competition piece like her life depended on it. First, she memorized the Bach Minuet perfectly. She practiced it over and over until she could play it in her sleep. But that was just the beginning. Next, Sarah found a recording of Chopin's Minute Waltz online. It was a famous piece that most piano students dreamed of playing someday. The melody was fast and flowing like water dancing over rocks. Sarah had been working on this piece for months in secret. She discovered that the Bach Minuet and the Chopin waltz had some similar notes. With careful practice, she figured out how to blend them together. The Bach would flow naturally into the Chopin, as if they were always meant to be connected, but Sarah was not finished yet. She remembered her grandfather playing jazz music late. At night, when he thought no one was listening, he would take a simple melody and twist it, change it, make it swing and bounce in new ways. Sarah decided to end her piece with a jazz improvisation. She would take the main themes from both the Bach and the Chopin and play them in a jazz style. It would be like having a conversation between old classical music and modern sounds every night. Sarah practiced this ambitious plan. She would play the Bach Minuet exactly as written. Then she would transition smoothly into the Chopin waltz, her fingers flying across the keys. Finally, she would slow down and let the jazz improvisation carry the audience to a gentle, surprising ending. The old piano was not perfect for this kind of advanced playing. Some keys stuck and others sounded different from the rest. But Sarah learned to work around these problems. She knew exactly which keys to press lighter and which ones needed extra force. Her fingers began to hurt from all the practicing. She developed small calluses on her fingertips, different from the ones she got from carrying plates at the restaurant. These were musicians' calluses, earned from hours of dedicated practice. Sarah's parents noticed that she was staying later at the restaurant, but they thought she was just being extra helpful with cleaning. They had no idea that their daughter was preparing for the performance of her life. At school, Mrs. Chen checked on Sarah's progress every few days. "How is the batch piece coming along?" She would ask. "Good," Sarah would answer. "I think I have it memorized." Double quotes. Mrs. Chen was pleased. She had no idea that Sarah was planning something much more complicated than a simple batch minuet. Sarah's friend Jessica was excited about the competition. "I can't wait to hear you play," she said. "It'll be so cool to see you on that big stage." Other students were also supportive, but Sarah could tell they were not expecting anything spectacular. They thought of her as the quiet girl who played easy music. Some of them seemed to feel sorry for her, like she was only in the competition. Because Mrs. Chun needed an extra person, this made Sarah even more determined to surprise them. But it also made her more nervous. What if her plan was too ambitious? What if she bit off more than she could chew? 2 weeks before the competition, Sarah had a scary moment. She was practicing her transition from batch to Chopin when she made a mistake. Her fingers got tangled up and the music sounded terrible. For a moment she panicked. Maybe this was too hard. Maybe she should just stick with the simple batch piece, but Sarah took a deep breath and tried again. This time, the transition was smooth and beautiful. She reminded herself that mistakes were part of learning. Her grandfather had always said that the only people who never made mistakes were people who never tried to do anything difficult. 1 week before the competition, Sarah felt confident about her piece. She could play all 3 parts, the batch, the Chopin, and the jazz improvisation, without any mistakes. But she wanted to make sure it all flowed together like one continuous story. She practiced the complete piece 5 times that night. Each time it got better. The music seemed to tell the story of her life, starting simple and quiet, then growing into something complex and beautiful, and finally ending with her own unique voice. Sarah imagined her grandfather sitting in the empty restaurant, listening to her practice. She could almost see him smiling and nodding his approval. He would have been proud of her courage to take such a big risk. The night before the competition, Sarah barely slept. She went over the music in her mind, playing every note in her imagination. She was as ready as she could be, but she was also terrified. Tomorrow, she would walk onto a stage in front of hundreds of people. Some of them would be expecting a simple, forgettable performance from the quiet girl who worked in a restaurant. But Sarah was about to give them something they would never forget. She had spent 3 weeks preparing not just a piece of music, but a revelation. Tomorrow, Sarah Martinez would show the world who she really was. The question was, would she be brave enough to go through with it when the moment came? As she finally drifted off to sleep, Sarah's fingers were still moving, playing the music. In her dreams, she had worked harder in these 3 weeks than she had ever worked in her life. Now all she could do was trust in her preparation and hope that her grandfather's spirit would guide her fingers when it mattered most. The competition was less than 12 hours away, and Sarah's secret was about to be revealed. Sarah woke up before her alarm clock rang. It was Saturday morning, the day of the regional music competition. Her stomach felt like it was full of butterflies doing somersaults. She had barely slept, and when she did sleep, she dreamed about playing piano in front of huge crowds. She got dressed carefully in her best outfit, a simple black dress that she usually wore to serve tables at the restaurant. It was not fancy like the dresses other competitors would probably wear, but it was clean and neat. Her mother had ironed it the night before and hung it carefully in Sarah's closet. At breakfast, Sarah could not eat much. Her parents noticed. She was nervous. "You'll do great today," her father said, putting his hand on her shoulder. "Just remember to breathe and play from your heart." "We're so proud of you already," her mother added. "No matter what happens today, you're our champion." Mrs. Chun had arranged to meet Sarah at school so they could drive to the competition together. When Sarah got there, she saw Mrs. Chun waiting by her car with Sarah's sheet music in a folder. "Ready for your big day?" Mrs. Chun asked with an encouraging smile. Sarah nodded, even though she did not feel ready at all. She felt like she might throw up or run away or both. The drive to Riverside Concert Hall took 30 minutes. Sarah stared out the window at the trees and buildings passing by. Mrs. Chen tried to make conversation, giving Sarah tips about performing. "Remember to sit up straight," Mrs. Chun said. "And if you make a small mistake, just keep playing. Most people won't even notice." Sarah nodded and made small sounds to show she was listening, but her mind was somewhere else. She was thinking about her secret plan. She still had not decided if she would really go through with playing more than just the Bach Minuet. Part of her wanted to play it safe and stick to the simple piece, but another part of her knew this might be her only chance to show what she could really do. When they arrived at the concert hall, Sarah's eyes grew wide. The building was much bigger than she had expected. There were fancy columns in front and big glass doors. People were walking in and out, carrying instrument cases and sheet music. Many of them looked very serious and important. Inside, the lobby was filled with young musicians and their families. Sarah could hear the sounds of different instruments coming from practice rooms down the hallway. Violins, flutes, clarinets, and pianos all mixed together in a symphony of warm-up exercises. Mrs. Chun helped Sarah register at the front desk. The woman behind the desk gave Sarah a number badge to pin on her dress. She was competitor number 43. "The piano competition starts at 2 o'clock, the desk woman said. "You have about 2 hours to warm up and get comfortable." Mrs. Chun led Sarah to one of the small practice rooms. It had an upright piano, similar to the one at her grandfather's restaurant but in much better condition. All the keys worked perfectly, and the sound was clear and strong. "Practice your Bach piece a few times," Mrs. Chun suggested, "but don't overdo it. You know the music well, just stay relaxed." Sarah sat down at the practice piano and began to play the Bach Minuet. Her fingers felt stiff and nervous at first, but gradually they loosened up. The familiar melody helped calm her nerves a little bit. While she practiced, Sarah could hear other competitors in nearby rooms. One person was playing a very difficult Beethoven sonata. Another was working on a fast Chopin etude that made Sarah's fingers hurt just listening to it. These students sounded incredibly talented and professional. Sarah began to doubt her secret plan. Maybe she should just play the simple Bach piece like everyone expected. These other competitors were clearly much more advanced than she was. What made her think she could surprise anyone? But then she remembered her grandfather's words about putting your heart into the music. She thought about all those nights practicing alone in the empty restaurant. She had worked just as hard as any of these other students, maybe harder. At 1:30, Mrs. Chen came back to get Sarah. "Time to go to the main auditorium," she said. "You're scheduled to play in about an hour." The main auditorium took Sarah's breath away. It was huge, with red velvet seats that rose up in rows toward the back. The stage looked enormous, with a beautiful black grand piano sitting in the center under bright lights. Sarah and Mrs. Chun found seats about halfway back. Other students and their teachers and families filled the auditorium. Sarah estimated there were at least 300 people there. The competition began with the younger students. Sarah watched as kids who looked like they were in elementary school played complicated pieces with confidence and skill. Some of them had been taking lessons since they were very small. They had expensive clothes and professional-looking sheet music. As the afternoon went on, the pieces got harder and the students got older. Sarah watched teenagers play music that she had only heard in recordings. Their fingers moved so fast they looked like blurs. The audience clapped politely after each performance. When competitor number 38 finished playing, Sarah realized she was getting close to her turn. Her heart started beating so hard she was sure everyone around her could hear it. Sarah Martinez, competitor 43, the announcer's voice echoed through the auditorium, playing Bach Minuet in G major. This was it. Sarah stood up on shaky legs. Mrs. Chun squeezed her hand and whispered, "You've got this." Sarah walked down the aisle toward the stage. The auditorium seemed to stretch on forever. Every step echoed in the big space. She could feel hundreds of eyes watching her. When she climbed the steps to the stage, the lights were brighter than she had expected. The grand piano looked even bigger up close. It was the most beautiful instrument she had ever seen, with glossy, black paint that reflected the lights like a mirror. Sarah sat down on the piano bench and adjusted it to the right height. She looked out at the audience, but the lights made it hard to see individual faces. She could see Mrs. Chun sitting in the middle section, giving her an encouraging nod. The judges sat at a long table to one side of the stage. There were 5 of them, and they looked very serious. They had clipboards and pencils, ready to write down their opinions about Sarah's performance. Sarah placed her hands on the piano keys. They felt smooth and perfectly balanced. This instrument was so much better than her grandfather's old piano at the restaurant. Every note would sound exactly as it should. She took a deep breath and began to play the Bach Minuet. The notes rang out clear and beautiful in the large auditorium. Sarah felt her nervousness start to fade away as the familiar melody flowed from her fingers. The audience was politely attentive, the way they had been for all the other simple pieces that day. The judges were writing notes on their clipboards, probably thinking this was just another basic performance by an average student. Sarah played the Bach Minuet exactly as it was written. Every note was perfect, every rhythm was precise. It was a lovely, safe performance that would earn her a respectable score, but as she approached the end of the piece, Sarah made her decision. Instead of finishing with the final chord, she let the melody continue. Her left hand began adding jazz harmonies while her right hand started the opening notes of Chopin's Minute Waltz. The change was so smooth that it took the audience a moment to realize what was happening. The judges' heads snapped up from their clipboards. People in the audience sat up straighter in their seats. Sarah's fingers flew across the keys as the Chopin Waltz unfolded in all its complexity. This was music she had practiced hundreds of times in secret, and now it poured out of her like water from a dam that had finally burst open. The auditorium fell completely silent except for the sound of the piano. Even the other competitors who had been quietly talking in the back stopped to listen for the next 2 minutes. Sarah played music that no one had expected from the quiet girl in the simple black dress. She played with technical skill that rivaled any of the advanced students who had performed earlier. But more than that, she played with passion and soul. As the Chopin Waltz reached its climactic ending, Sarah smoothly transitioned into her jazz improvisation. She took the themes from both pieces and wove them together in a style that was completely her own. This was the music of her grandfather, mixed with her own voice as a young artist. The improvisation was like a conversation between the past and the present, between classical tradition and modern creativity. Sarah's hands moved with confidence and joy, no longer nervous or hesitant. When she finally played the last chord, the auditorium was silent for a long moment. Sarah sat at the piano, breathing hard, not sure what to do next. Then the applause started. It began with a few people and quickly spread through the entire auditorium. People were not just clapping politely, they were standing up, cheering, whistling. The sound was overwhelming. Sarah looked out at the audience and saw Mrs. Chun standing with tears in her eyes, clapping as hard as she could. Other teachers and students were on their feet, looking amazed and delighted. The judges at their table were also standing and applauding. One of them was shaking his head in disbelief, but he was smiling. Sarah stood up and took a small bow, the way she had seen other performers do. The applause continued for what felt like forever. She had never experienced anything like this in her life. As she walked off the stage, Sarah felt like she was floating. She had done it. The applause seemed to last forever. Sarah had never heard anything so loud or so wonderful. As she walked down the stage steps, her legs felt like jelly, but her heart was soaring. She had actually done it. She had played her secret music in front of hundreds of people, and they loved it. Mrs. Chun met her at the bottom of the steps with tears streaming down her face. She wrapped Sarah in a big hug without saying a word. When she finally let go, she looked at Sarah with complete amazement. "Sarah," Mrs. Chun whispered, "I had no idea. How long have you been able to play like that?" Before Sarah could answer, people started approaching them. Other music teachers came over to shake Sarah's hand and ask where she studied. Students who had competed earlier wanted to know who her piano teacher was. Parents were taking pictures and asking for Sarah's name. Sarah felt overwhelmed by all the attention. She had spent so many years being invisible, and now suddenly everyone wanted to talk to her. She did not know what to say or how to act. The competition continued with the remaining students. But Sarah could tell that people were having trouble concentrating on the other performances. She heard whispers throughout the auditorium as people talked about what they had just witnessed. When the last competitor finished playing, there was a 30-minute break before the judges announced the winners. Sarah and Mrs. Chun found a quiet corner in the lobby to sit and catch their breath. "Sarah, I owe you an apology," Mrs. Chun said. "I completely underestimated your abilities. Why didn't you ever show me what you could really do?" Sarah looked down at her hands. "I was scared," she said honestly. "I didn't think anyone would believe me, and I didn't want to disappoint people if I wasn't as good as I thought I was." "Where did you learn to play like that?" Mrs. Chun asked. "Those pieces were incredibly advanced. And that improvisation at the end, that was professional-level musicianship." Sarah told Mrs. Chun about her grandfather's old piano at the restaurant. She explained how she had been teaching herself by watching videos and practicing late at night when no one was around. She talked about the hours and hours she had spent working on difficult pieces in secret. Mrs. Chun listened with growing amazement. "Sarah, you've essentially given yourself an advanced musical education. What you did today was remarkable, but it's also just the beginning of what you could accomplish with proper training." Before Sarah could ask what she meant, the announcer called everyone back into the auditorium for the awards ceremony. Sarah and Mrs. Chun found their seats just as the judges took the stage. The head judge, a distinguished-looking woman with gray hair, stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "every year this competition brings us talented young musicians. But today we witnessed something truly special. One performance stood out not just for its technical excellence, but for its creativity, passion, and sheer musical courage." Sarah's heart pounded. Was the judge talking about her performance? The winner of this year's regional piano competition is Sarah Martinez from Lincoln High School. The auditorium erupted in applause again. Sarah sat frozen in her seat, unable to believe what she had just heard. She had won? She had actually won the entire competition? Mrs. Chun grabbed Sarah's arm and pushed her gently toward the aisle. "Go," she said with a huge smile. "Go get your award." Sarah walked toward the stage in a daze. Everything felt like a dream. The head judge met her with a beautiful trophy and a certificate. There were photographers taking pictures, and someone put a bouquet of flowers in her arms. "Sarah," the head judge said as she handed over the trophy, "your performance today was extraordinary. But I want to talk to you about something even more important." The judge led Sarah to the side of the stage where a tall man in a dark suit was waiting. He had kind eyes and a warm smile. "Sarah, I'd like you to meet Professor Williams from the State University School of Music," the head judge said. Professor Williams shook Sarah's hand. "Sarah, I've been teaching piano for 25 years, and your performance today was one of the most impressive I've ever heard from a young musician. I'd like to offer you a full scholarship to our music program." Sarah's mouth fell open. Scholarship? To a real music school? She had never even dreamed of such a thing. "You have incredible natural talent," Professor Williams continued. "But more than that, you have the passion and creativity that can't be taught. With proper training, you could have a professional career in music if that's what you want." "Sarah," looked out into the audience and saw Mrs. Chun watching with tears in her eyes. She saw her parents, who had somehow made it to the auditorium and were standing in the back looking proud and confused at the same time. I don't know what to say, Sarah stammered. You don't have to decide anything right now, Professor Williams said kindly. Take my card and think about it. But Sarah, opportunities like this don't come along very often. You have a gift that deserves to be nurtured. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. There were more pictures, more interviews, more people wanting to talk to Sarah. A reporter from the local newspaper asked her questions about how she learned to play piano. Someone from the regional television station wanted to schedule an interview. When Sarah and Mrs. Chun finally got back to the car, Sarah felt exhausted but exhilarated. She looked at the trophy in her lap and still could not quite believe it. Was real. Your parents are going to be so proud, Mrs. Chun said as they drove back toward town. Have you thought about Professor Williams' offer? Sarah shook her head. It all seems impossible. People like me don't get scholarships to music schools. I work in a restaurant. I've never had a real piano teacher. Sarah, Mrs. Chun said seriously, what you accomplished today proves that you're not just people like you anymore. You're a gifted musician who happens to work in a restaurant. There's a big difference. When they arrived at the restaurant, Sarah was shocked to see a crowd of people waiting outside. Word had somehow spread about her victory, and neighbors, customers, and friends had come to congratulate her. Her parents ran out to hug her, both talking at once in Spanish and English. Her father lifted her off the ground and spun her around. Her mother cried and kissed her cheeks over and over. We're so proud, Mia, her mother said. We had no idea you could play like that. Why didn't you tell us? Her father asked, but he was smiling so big that Sarah could tell he was not upset. The celebration continued inside the restaurant. Someone had made a banner that said, "Congratulations, Sarah," in both English and Spanish. People were taking pictures of Sarah with her trophy. Her grandfather's old piano had been uncovered and decorated with flowers. As the evening went on, people kept asking Sarah to play something. Finally, she sat down at the familiar old piano and played a simple, beautiful song. It was not a difficult piece, but she played it with all the feeling in her heart. The restaurant fell silent as the gentle melody filled the space. When she finished, everyone applauded, but it was different from the applause at the competition. This applause was full of love from people who had known Sarah when she was just the quiet girl who served their food. Now they knew she was something special, but she was still their Sarah. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the restaurant was cleaned up, Sarah sat alone at her grandfather's piano. She played softly, thinking about everything that had happened. In one day, her entire life had changed. She had gone from being the invisible girl in the back of music class to being the regional piano champion. She had gone from hiding her talents to having them celebrated by hundreds of people. She had gone from thinking college was impossible to being offered a full scholarship to study music. Sarah thought about her grandfather and wished he could have been there to see her performance. But somehow she felt like he had been with her on that stage. His spirit had guided her fingers and given her the courage to take such a big risk. The next week, Sarah's picture was on the front page of the local newspaper. The headline read, "Local Teens Hidden Talent Stuns Regional Competition." The article told the story of how a restaurant worker had taught herself to play piano and surprised everyone with her incredible performance. People from all over town came to the restaurant hoping to meet Sarah or hear her play. Business was better than it had ever been, and her parents were able to hire extra help for the first time. Sarah appeared on the local television morning show, where she played a short piece and talked about her musical journey. The video was shared online and got thousands of views. Comments poured in from people who were inspired by her story, but perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Mrs. Chun approached Sarah after music class the following Monday. "Sarah," she said with tears in her eyes, "I want to apologize for not seeing your potential sooner. I should have been a better teacher. I should have pushed you to show me what you could really do." Sarah shook her head. "Mrs. Chun, you gave me the opportunity that changed everything. If you hadn't asked me to compete, none of this would have happened. Mrs. Chen smiled. You know what I've learned from all this? Sometimes our greatest gifts are hidden, even from ourselves. And sometimes it takes courage to let those gifts shine. 3 weeks later, Sarah made her decision. She accepted Professor Williams' scholarship offer and enrolled in the State University School of Music for the following fall.